I will kind of project my own ideas, thoughts, and desires onto this person with before embracing who they were or actually getting to know them. It is a way to self-preserve, right? Because if I know exactly who this person, if I go into it saying, okay, well, if he's this, and this, then I'd be good. I would definitely pose a feeling of inadequacy on my partners. And I wasn't even recognizing it.
I realized that I started to put partners in the place of God. I expected them to do what only He could do. Looking back on it now, I realized I started to lose myself. So I've been learning that Jesus can speak to me sweetly. I'm learning Jesus as husband, bridegroom towards me, the church.
How he helped me get over that resentment is when he told me that
Welcome to The Link, where we connect Christ to our broken world. Here on the podcast, we talk about all the important areas of life and culture, presenting Christ as the missing link that brings everything together. Join us on this journey on The Link podcast with your host, Professor X. Hey, what's up, everyone? It's your boy, Professor X, and welcome to The Link. Today, we've reached the last episode in our series in February on relationships. And this is definitely going to be a really good episode because I'm bringing on a guest and we're going to talk about all of our lessons through relationships. Both of us have gone through seasons of, going into relationships, having to deal with misconceptions that we learned from the past and the mistakes we would have made along the way, and how God has helped us learn from those mistakes and guide us forward into healing and understanding more about what He wants relationships to look like. So I know that our conversation is going to be really, really good. Stay tuned all the way to the end because we really shared a lot of gems in this episode. I'm bringing on one of my favorite people in the world. This is my cousin again. Azana is back. So you guys know that we're bringing all of the good stuff. But without further ado, we're going to get right to that conversation. So stay tuned. Let's get to it. All right, everyone. Coming on for the second time is my cousin Azana Garvey. What's up, cuz?
hi, hi, I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's amazing to have you on as always. You already know that we're
Thank you.
going to have gems. We're gonna have fun moments. We're gonna talk all the talk, and
Hmm.
this is a day where we are literally putting each other on blast, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Because we've gone through some things. We've experienced some things when it comes to relationships, and
Hmm.
I think it's one thing to know what you should do, but then we can also learn from our mistakes. Because there's a time where the dating scene is crazy. There's a time where the relationship scene can be uncertain. So I think there's value in us sharing some of the things we've had to learn along the way, and then coming to where we are now and how God is moving us forward. But I think the first place we have to start is our potential misconceptions. Like, we didn't have all the right ideas about what relationships would do. There are some things that we thought that as we got older, we realized that's not how this works. So the first place I want to start is like, can you think of misconceptions you had about love and romance that you realized later on in life was not the case?
Yeah, definitely. Some misconceptions that I had was I usually went into relationships with a preconceived notion of what the person was supposed to be. I will kind of project my own ideas, thoughts, and desires onto this person with before embracing who they were or actually getting to know them. And I feel as though that is something that's really common amongst people, especially with social media, cultural expectation, or even representations and the roles that they see in their day-to-day life or in their within their family, those romantic dynamics. And that caused me to kind of go into the dating scene or romantic scene with a kind of bias. Everyone does, right? Of what they want in a partner, what they think that a man should be, or what they think that a woman should be. And I felt like that was definitely one of the misconceptions I have, that, people are not something that you can mold, and they're not something that you can um kind of expect certain things out of. You have to get to know them first. You can't fall in love with their potential or what you believe them to be. You have to fall in love with the person, right? So that was definitely a misconception I had.
Yeah, it's an easy thing that you can fall into, because it's like you want to know what you're getting into, and I think sometimes we can fall into that trap of putting someone in a box so we know what to expect, we know what's coming. I'm a bit curious, do you think that was like a defense mechanism, almost like a way to protect yourself from any potential issues or flaws a person might have? Anything like that?
Yeah, I would say that it was, well, it's not only a defense, it's a strategy, especially as a woman going into the romantic scene, right? There, we, I feel like, well, I can only speak for myself, but I'm sure that many women would agree that going into the romantic scene can be a bit nerve wracking for women, particularly because we don't want to come off as, like a particular way. And not only that, we tend to be judged for our choices romantically. So that's why we tend to have higher expectations or higher standards, right? Than men, because it is a way to self-preserve, right? Because if I know exactly who this person, if I go into it saying, okay, well, if he's this, and this, then I'd be good, right? And I kind of went into it with this like checklist, right? So I'm expecting him to be all these things. And if he's not, then I'm like, or if he's like not necessarily presenting it in a way that I can recognize, right? Because that's really important too. If he's not presenting in a way that I can see or recognize, I'm just there like, oh, well, he's not good for me, or he's not relationship material and all that. So I feel as though, yes, it is a defense of my heart, but it's also a strategy to um prevent myself from making mistakes.
Yeah, I could imagine that for real. I can kind of um identify with that in the sense of not wanting to walk into something that you're not sure of. Um,
Mhm.
I think my biggest misconception with relationships was slightly different. The big one for me was that I thought relationships would fix the emotional voids that I had. So like I would watch a lot of movies, romantic movies, Hallmark movies. The thing I got from so many of those movies is that when you find a partner, you become whole, you become complete, you got your person for the rest of your life, and all of a sudden, the trauma you went through as a kid is gone because you could just put it on this person. They just made everything better. And that's just not how it works. Like I've realized that when you go to someone in order to be fixed, what ends up happening is that you could very well break that person too. Because if you trauma bond, if you throw all of your baggage on them and expect them to just fix you, you end up putting a weight on them that's heavy for them too. So what would end up happening a lot of times is that I put myself out there emotionally too much. I share too much. I go too deep. I put too much of an expectation on the person, um, to be an emotional like stability for me. So that was the big misconception from all of those romantic comedies that made it seem like as soon as you got a partner, all of these issues would just fix themselves. So a lot of times I went into relationships thinking that that's what would happen, but the truth is that you have to come into a relationship mostly worked on already, because it's more about what you can give to the other person than what they can give you. So that was a big thing for me. Um, and then now, Azana, as we're thinking of these misconceptions, for you, it was this idea like you are this, you gotta be this. I know what's going on. I'm not going to be taken advantage of. Are
Right.
are you able to identify how that affected your previous relationships, like how that might have caused issues at points?
Oh yeah, definitely the major issue that it posed in my relationships is the insane pressure I was putting on my partners. Um, Several times they would like complain about it. They'd be like, "Oh well, I'm not like that, and I'm not who you think I am, or what you need me to be." Or they would say like they're not good enough for me, or they feel like they are not reaching my standards, and they would kind of go into this state of like feeling inadequate. I would definitely pose a feeling of inadequacy on my partners, and I wasn't even recognizing it because I was saying to myself, well, it is what it is. If you're not this, then what's the point, right? But I realized that I wasn't only hurting them, I was also hurting myself because I was constantly being disappointed. I was constantly being let down. I found myself losing hope in love and romance and whether or not I would ever find that for myself because I was saying, well, there's no one for me. Right. And definitely a feeling of loneliness and was starting to creep into my life, and a feeling of, um, I would say hopelessness for sure was creeping into my life. Hmm.
Yeah, I know that feeling of hopelessness. And for me, as I look for relationships to fix things, I feel the hopelessness when, like, I'm with somebody, but the issues are still there. It's
Right.
like, dang, boy, I thought if I had a girlfriend, I wouldn't be lonely anymore. But, like,
Mm.
when I'm laying down in my bed and no one is around, those feelings came back. So it was like, oh shoot, well this is probably why you should have a close relationship with God, because no matter how close you get to someone, there's still moments when only He can touch those places that are broken. And I realized that I started to put my um partners in the place of God. I expected them to do what only He could do. So then what started to happen was I spent less time with God and more time with them. Less time with my friends and more time with them. They became an idol. And at that point, identity starts to shift, because now their word takes precedent over God's word. And I could actually, like, looking back on it now, I realized I started to lose myself based on what they would have wanted. You think you Zan, do you think you had that happen to you as well? Did that ever happen to you in relationships? Like, you start to lose yourself as you look at, you just want to please this person to the point where you start making changes and compromise. Did that ever happen to you?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like that happens to most people because you I believe it is because of relationship and partnership is so heavily, I don't even want to say idolized, but I would say it's something that is seen as like a ultimate goal for as a person, as a human in general. We all crave partnership, we all crave admiration, we all crave to be accepted, right? So we kind of see, we kind of go into it thinking that our partner is supposed to be our everything. Particularly when, especially in the Christian community where it said that, you're supposed to cleave to one another and become one. I believe that many people go about that approach incorrectly, including me, especially when you first go into it. You are kind of going into it thinking, well, if we're supposed to be one, that means that I'm supposed to lose all individualism. So
Wow.
all of my time goes into them, all of my um thoughts, all of my burdens go into them, when that was not the original intention, right? The original thing was, I'm giving you a companion. I'm not trying to give you somebody to replace me, right?
Yep.
Which is something that a lot of people miss, right? I'm trying to give you I'm trying to give you an equal, right? I'm not trying to give you a replacement, which is what I felt like I was missing for sure.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. Just popping in to say that if you haven't already, make sure to like this episode and also subscribe to stay updated with all of the content that is coming your way. Join me on the journey of finding the missing link. Peace.
Yeah. And a major thing that I didn't realize is that I didn't know I could still have really close friendships and a relationship on top of that. Like I had this fear that if I invested in other friendships, then all of a sudden my relationship would fall apart. So there was also that anxiety. And I know that there are others that can struggle with that feeling. Like if I don't fix this, if I don't spend time here, then it's all gonna fall apart. But I've realized that if that's the case, then there's some kind of issue going on. Either it is an internal thing where there might have been trauma there might have been situations where you did lose a lot, and in that loss is that feeling of, I need to hold on to everything tightly. That's one scenario. And then there's also the other scenario where the partner is making you feel that way based on how they treat you. So if you try to hang out with friends and all of a sudden they're coming to you with comments that suggest they're jealous or that you might be betraying them, then that's also a sign of that brokenness. But one of the things I've recognized now is that even in a relationship, you still need your community. You still need your people, because what you can tell your brother over here, you may not necessarily be able to tell your partner immediately. You can process it with your brother, get the raw emotions out, then come back to your partner to discuss it from a different place. But for me, I try to put everything in one place. And I think one of the things that we can do better or we can realize as a generation is that we can still have community even in our relationships.
Yeah, for sure. And I will also like to add on to that point that when it is easy it's easy to lose sight of yourself when you are constantly fixated on something else, right? You start to, you know what is, I, it all is leading me back to this quote that I remember one of my really close friends telling me, is that when you, is it's easy to walk off a cliff when you're constantly looking at the horizon, right? Sometimes you
Hmm.
have to stop, look around and recognize that your path is your own, right? And that yes, where you're where you're going is a goal, right? There's no problem in having a goal for partnership. There's nothing wrong with wanting that for yourself. But there is something wrong with not actively participating in your journey, what God has in store for you. And missing out on opportunity for connection, missing out on friendship, missing out on family in order to appease what you think this person is going to require, what you think that this relationship is going to need. But what I will say, just to cap off my addition, is that if what God has for you, nobody could take away. So if it is a situation that you feel as though that if you look away for a second, then everything is going to fall apart, it wasn't for you. It wasn't for you.
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
your person or who's supposed to be with you, they will in fact encourage you. They want to see you flourish. They will enjoy seeing you with your friends. They will enjoy seeing you grow in God. They will enjoy seeing you grow in your career, right? They want to see the best for you. That's what love is about. Hmm.
Yeah. And it's definitely it's a piece of advice I wish I listened to earlier in terms of yes, relationships take work. At the same time, there comes a point where it's not worth the amount of sacrifice, especially in the earlier stages. Like if you recognize you have to change what God told you to do, or if you recognize that you have to walk off the path that God had you on, unless you know that's where God is taking you, then we know for sure that something is off. Because what's gonna happen more so is that as you are walking along your journey, God will align the right person with you. It's true that there's still going to be sacrifice, there's still going to be compromise. There are things that, for example, I'm doing now in singleness that I know can't follow me into relationships or into marriage. At the same time, we both have come to recognize what God has called us to. So we know that if someone comes into our life and it challenges that, they have to go. They can't stay there. So one of the major things that I be doing differently is boundaries. Because when I look back on my relationship journey, boundaries is one of the hardest things that I've had to put in place. Because again, going back to if I don't work on this, everything's gonna fall apart. A boundary can also feel like if I put this boundary, it's gonna scare off that person. Well, the interesting thing about boundaries is that they'll do one of two things. They will either weed out the wrong person, or they will make sure that when you're with the right person, the relationship stays pure. So boundaries is a part of relationships that we can't move aside or we can't live without, because boundaries give us the playground that we can play in freely in a relationship. So for example, we don't go these places after a certain time, which means that before this certain time, we have free reign. I think with boundaries, our mindsets have to shift from I can't do this to I can do everything within this barrier. The barrier is there for safety, is there to protect purity. And Zan, that's definitely something I wish I held on to more, because now that I am in a season of singleness again, this is a part that's definitely shifting for me in the way that I see boundaries.
Mm. One thing that my best friend she told me is that when we were speaking about something similar when it comes to relationships, right? And romanticism. And one thing that she told me was that if somebody places a boundary with you, it means that they like you. And I've never heard that perspective before, right? And I asked her, what does she mean by that? What do you mean that they like you? Because I always saw, as you say, if somebody places a barrier to something, I figured that it is that I'm not worthy of that kind of access, right? Or they have deemed me not necessarily, I would say, they wouldn't be allowing me to be a part of their life in the way that I would have thought they would have allowed me. And she was saying that no, when someone places a boundary with you, it means they're bringing up something that, hey, this makes you uncomfortable, but I still want to be friends, or I still want to have this connection. But if this continues the way it's going, well, I'm going to feel like I want to pull away, but I don't want to do that. So I'm bringing this up to you, hoping that you will accept it, right? So that we can continue to have this connection, right? Because I do like what we have. And it totally changed my mind on when people place boundaries or make boundaries with you. Is they're telling you, hey, I want our friendship to continue, or I want to still have this connection with you, right? And I am being vulnerable in telling you, hey, this thing makes me uncomfortable. Because the thing about placing boundaries that I feel like people don't see is that this person is being vulnerable. They're showing you a weakness they have, or they're showing you something. I maybe not weakness, but they're showing you something that can potentially harm them, right? Like, hey, this is a potential area of harm that I have, and I would like you to respect that, right? And you respecting their boundary is you showing them, hey, I care about you and how you feel, right? And I care about our connection. So I feel as though boundaries, as you say, should be embraced more. And I feel like they should be seen as opportunities to connect than opportunities to pull away, you know?
Yeah, and then if we ever find ourselves struggling to place boundaries, that's a part where we have to examine why. Are we scared that if we put that in place, they'll run away? Do boundaries feel like a prison? Does it feel more like restriction than the path forward? And that's a place where we can start to get curious, because what happens when we go into relationships without boundaries is that anything goes. And when anything goes, it hampers your ability to be honest, because no times you get offended, or times that people step over things that you're comfortable with, those go unchecked. And then with physical boundaries, it puts you in problems. So if you're trying to stay pure before marriage, the physical boundaries become very important. And then when those things aren't there, then you put yourself in situations where you make it more and more difficult for you to stay on that path. So if there's ever a point where we're struggling to put boundaries there, that's a place where we have to do some self-reflection to understand, like, is it a trauma response? Is it just a training that we have mentally that we have to work through? Because I think that if we can really learn to appreciate boundaries, then our relationships, romantic and platonic, would improve, because boundaries is not just a man-made thing, it's also in the Bible. God placed boundaries for how far the water could go. God placed boundaries in terms of, when a day ends and when it starts. Boundaries are what gives order and structure. And so with romantic relationships, that's where it becomes really important. Um, but no, Zan, I think it's important for us to start talking about how God has really helped us to work through our misconceptions, how He's helped us to see the lessons in some of the mistakes that we've made. Because yes, we've made
Mhm.
some mistakes, but guys, we've been learning. So Zan, is there like anything in particular that like God showed me this that will help me with my relationships?
Well, I would say that what was a real turning point for me was that I started to build a resentment towards others, right? I started to feel like they I started to feel like they were doing it on purpose. And I remember thinking or I should rather say, usually when I think I'm talking to God, but when I was talking to the Lord, I was thinking, Lord, I don't understand why I am going through the things that I'm going through, right? And he told me that that's because you don't know how to love. And I was wondering what he was talking about, because I said, but I know exactly how to love. And I'm thinking, because being the oldest cousin, being the oldest sibling, I have to take care of everyone in my life and at some point in time. And especially with expectation placed on me as the oldest, Xavier can also um,
Don't know.
testify that there is a lot of pressure. So we think that to love is to direct, to love is to take care of, to love is to guide, right? But the Lord was pointing out to me that to love is to love, to be loved is to be known. He said, and if you don't make the effort to know somebody, to love is a choice, it's a skill, it's something that you practice, right? And he directed, and you know me, I love scripture, right? So he directed me to First Corinthians 13, expressing what love is, right? So it goes into, love is patient, love is kind, doesn't dishonor, it doesn't boast, it doesn't hold grudge, right? He was showing me that to to love is to embrace. To love is to give patience, right? And he was saying that you lack patience. He said you lack the ability to look past mistakes and flaws. You lack the ability to go go into relationships, or to go into this commitment with somebody, recognizing that they may stumble, right? Said that nobody is perfect, and and I make everybody the way that I make them, right? So you are the person who is unaccepting, right? You are the person who doesn't know how to love. Is not the other way around, right? And I was like, God be humbling me. So I was like, wow. I had no idea that I was missing something so crucial, and I feel as though many people do. They don't recognize that, because remember, love starts from within, right? And circling back to what I said before, to be loved is to be known, right? You have to know yourself before, because if you don't know yourself, you can't love yourself, right? And I recognize that, wow, if I'm not loving myself, and if I don't know myself, how can I get to know anybody? So that was definitely something that I had to learn to do. I had to get to know myself. And what is it, and separate what I want from what I need, and separate from what I want and need to what God has in store, right? And I had to learn how to do all those things. I had to definitely mature. There's a huge gap of maturity, definitely, when going into a romantic setting with another person. And I feel as though that is definitely a step that all people have to do first before going into um a relationship. And not only that, I will also say that God also showed me something else, and he said that I love you, right? And I accept you, right? He said that you come to me as you are, right? And he says, so who are you to have standard and expectation that is not of me? I set the standard. I set the expectation, right? He said that it is your job to come to me, right? So I feel as though that's something that we definitely have to do. That definitely changed me on how I go into romantic situations. I check myself first, and then I check the father, And then I say, good. Then you move forward, right? So that's really important.
That was such a big point in terms of going to the Lord, because that's also how He has really been helping me work through some of the stuff that I've had to deal with. I think God God is such a mastermind, because going back to the misconception that I've had to go through is that I thought a relationship could fix me or give me that emotional stability. One of the hardest things that I've ever had to grapple with in terms of relationships is the whole idea of the husband being like the anchor of the house. So, like, if you look at Ephesians 5, like, the husband is supposed to give his life for his wife, wash her with the word. And I'm like, that's all well and good. That's amazing. But, like, what's the wife supposed to do for me? Like, I try to make sure that I could, because if I supposed to just take all of the beatings, all of the lashings, like, am I just going to be a corpse on the ground and my family is great, but I'm just like in another life? So honestly, Azana, that was so frustrating and difficult for me to understand, because it felt as if I am the man is supposed to take everything, but I can't find where's my source of comfort. What about me? And what God had to show me was the image of the church as Jesus' bride and Jesus as the bridegroom. So, going back to that analogy, I am to love my future wife the way Jesus loves the church. So that means the church is the bride, which means the church is the one that Jesus laid his life down for, washes with the word. And then God had to be like, do you think the church only has women, or does the church involve women and men? I was like, well, the church has women and men. So then he was like, so then that means you are my bride. So there is a place for you to go. Me. And honestly, Azana, when he flipped the script like that on me, I was like, so you're telling me that Jesus is my husband? That's weird. Um,
Right. Because I feel as though that, I feel as though the reason why it seems like such a weird thing is because I believe that humans place their own understanding to the words and meaning of bride and husband and wife and stuff like that. They've gendered them, right? So many times I feel as though men feel like they have all of this burden, right? Because when Jesus is saying, "You're my bride," right? He's not saying that you're a woman, obviously, right? And it might not even necessarily be something romantic. He's saying that there are specific spiritual roles that a husband has and specific spiritual roles that a wife has, right? And he's saying that in this relationship dynamic, I am your spiritual husband. I have these particular responsibilities and roles in this relationship, right? And this is what he's pointing out to. This is what I feel as though many men should you should talk about this more to more men, because I find that men lack community and they lack connection because they feel as though that is something that's inherently feminine, and it's not, right? Looking for guidance, looking for, because I find a lot of men feel as though that they are the people that have to be the trailblazers. They have to be the people that um forge a way, and they have to be the pillar and all of that, right? And one thing that, my father said that really opened my eyes to this is that when Peter told God that it was Peter, I believe, it was Peter, that he was going to be the rock in which he built his church. That was Peter or Paul? Peter, right? And
You on the right track.
I don't know, right, chat, good. He said that he was going to be the rock that he built his church, right? But what my father pointed out was that he was the church in this situation, right? He was looking at Jesus as the rock, the base. This is what men are supposed to represent in marriage, right? You are the person in which your wife is supposed to build on top of. You are her foundation. Who she's supposed to build a home on you, raise children on you. You're supposed to be the guidance, her bones, right? That's what it's supposed to be, her stability, right? Well, that is what Jesus is supposed to be for you, right? Your foundation. You are supposed to lay yourself on him. Bring his burden, bring your burdens to him. That is something that I feel like men should do more. They should seek that connection more with God.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. That the problem that I encountered in my previous relationships was trying to find a home for me, not realizing that
Mm,
that home is God, because I'm now in a place where I'm learning a side of God I didn't know was there. I'm
mm,
learning more about his tenderness towards me, knowing that the tenderness that we see in the word is not something just reserved for his daughters, but it also is for his sons. So I've been learning that Jesus can speak to me sweetly. I've been learning that Jesus can affirm me in ways that I would have looked to others for. So now I'm in this place where I'm learning Jesus as husband, bridegroom towards me, the church, so that now any future relationship I get into, I know where I can go. So on the days when my future wife isn't able to be there, on days when she's having a bad day, on days where she needs me, I can have the strength to be present because I know that my ultimate guide, my ultimate home is never going to sway. He don't have off days. He don't have bad days. So the difficult thing that I'm walking through now is the discipline of just coming. Because the thing with men that I will speak on is that a lot of us had that experience that father figures are, they give you tough love, but they tend to side we don't always see. So now coming to God as a spiritual lover, as a companion, that part of him is not the easiest to get. But once you do understand that, and you do understand that that love is for you, then there's a tenderness and there's a healing that starts to come. Because when God becomes that home, then you're able to give. You can go into a relationship with the mindset of, I'm going to serve you, as opposed to you're going to fix me or you're going to make me feel like a man or make me feel like I'm bigger, because God already does that for you. So now when you come to this woman, you can actually show up the way you're supposed to because you're good. So that's the place I'm in now, and that's the big revelation that God gave me. Understanding my role as a church and then accepting Jesus as a bridegroom for me. So that's been absolutely huge.
But I will add some. I'm glad you pointed out the male perspective, but I just want to add the female perspective for sure as well. That it also sounds like similarly to how men view their role as husbands and how much they have on their plate. As women, we sense that as well, a huge burden, right? When it talks about how women are supposed to love their husbands as they love Christ, right? And for us, I definitely see the hardships for men in that there's not a lot of male leadership or male mentorship in the like in not only family wise and in marriage wise, but also um in the church, right? And I feel as though that as women there is a undertone of resentment for sure, because we feel as though as women we're always left to carry everything, right? And especially growing up, I see the women, well, Xavier, you can attest, the women in our life are strong. They carry everything on their back, right? My mother, your mother, my aunt, I see our grandmother, I see the women in our in or the women that I see in my life are such pillars of strength that sometimes I used to sit back and think to myself, what exactly is a man for? Right? What exactly am I getting out of this? Right? Especially with such God fearing women that I see, right? And they treat their not only in my family but also outside of it, they treat their husbands like how they're supposed to be treated according to the Bible and stuff, and their husbands are just not living up to the standard. They're just not providing what God is saying that they're supposed to be doing, right? They are totally abandoning their post. And growing up as a young girl, and I will probably say that most young women in the church grew up thinking the same way. Like, this is very one sided. This is extremely one sided, right? If we feel as though that we are forced to take up not only our burdens, but also yours. And that is a real reality that women go into when going onto the romantic scene. That's very real. We are constantly warned by the men in our lives about other men, right? Which kind of feeds into the whole thing of, oh, you have to have high standards and you have to protect yourself and you have to be wary of them. You have to be this, you have to be that. And it creates this huge rift, right? And I feel as though that as women, right, I'm understanding of our pain and I'm understanding of the unfortunate circumstances that should I say majority? Many women are placed under as a result of men not taking accountability for their role, not only spiritually, but also physically on earth, as fathers, as leaders, as husbands. I recognize that it is causing a, I should say, a distrust, a deep wound in women towards men. And when I recognized that wound in myself, when I was having my conversation with God about, you know, and he pointed out to me that, well, same thing you said, how a woman is supposed to cleave, right? Supposed to cleave to your husband or love your husband as you love the church, right? Or no, love your husband as you love me, right? And he said, but what does that mean for you, right? And I was like, well, that I'm supposed to be in servitude and submission as I am to you, right? In my mind, that's what it means. And he was saying, no, it means that you there is an air of selectiveness that I place in you. I'm giving you power here. And I'm like, how? What power are you giving me exactly? Right? And he was saying that I am telling you that if he's not reminding you of me, right, then something is wrong. That means that he's telling me that your selection and your discernment, the intuition that I gave you, you have to lean into it more. Trust yourself. I gave you power just as I've given men power, right? He said that you are to go into it. When you're going into relationships, he said, look for me. Start looking for what you think is supposed to be a man. Start looking for what people are telling you you're supposed to be looking for. Look for me. How you see me, look for that. That is what I want you to do. And I feel as though more women should do that, or take that approach when going into onto the romantic scene, because you can easily get wrapped up in the, you want a man with money, or you want a man with a car, or you want a man that he's famous, when you should really be looking for, does my is this man mirroring Christ? As Christ shines in my life, is he mirroring that, right? And if he ain't, well, girl,
Yeah.
that is when that is when you check out, right? Well, yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, one of the things I'm curious about, Zan, is how has God helped you work through that resentment? Because the first thing I want to say is I just want to validate what you and so many women have gone through with past relationships. So how has God helped you trust again and hope again in the men in your life?
He showed me that love is, he said, love is intentional, right? It's a decision. So instead of chasing infatuation, instead of chasing what you believe you a man is supposed to be, or what society or your specific culture is telling you a man is supposed to look like, he was showing me that you have to change the way that you view men. You have to change the way that you view what a husband is supposed to be, right? He directed me to, as you say, Ephesians 5, what a husband's supposed to look like. And how he helped me get over that resentment is when he told me that the only way that the wound can be healed, right, is through forgiveness. That's the only way. He told me that you have to forgive the men in not only your life, he said, but you have to forgive the men and that hurt the women that you love, right? He said you have to. He said because that's the thing about love. In First Corinthians, it doesn't keep track of wrongdoing, right? It doesn't keep record, right? He says so you have to start doing that. You have to start practicing love, actual love, what it is, right? He said that that is the only way, not saying, of course, that wrongdoing goes without consequence. But at the same
Mhm.
time, if you go into, if you are going into it with wounds still bleeding, right? You'll end up, you'll end up looking past or missing so much opportunity for that love and that connection. And especially when I know a lot of women go into it saying like, or from before, I had this thing that the only man that I will ever trust has died and rose again and is no longer on earth, right?
Oh
But
shoot.
no, I used to say that all the time, because, and I didn't even realize what an enormous wound I was speaking from, how much pain I was speaking from, right? And Jesus kind of directed me and said, it is okay to be hurt. But what is not okay is to project that hurt onto others, to bleed on others is not okay. Right? So that's definitely how he helped me curb that resentment. I had to heal myself. I had to take time away from men. I had to take time away from the ideology of them. I had to deconstruct my ideas of love and romanticism and relationship I have with men, and had to rebuild them scripturally and what they actually are, right? And he definitely had to change my thoughts for sure.
Listen, that is just, I appreciate God for carrying you
Hmm.
on that journey.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because the more I think about relationships and the wounds we've had to overcome, and the more I think about God's original design where He wants men and women to live together in harmony, then that healing becomes really important on both sides. Because for me as a man, one of the things that I've had to learn to let go of, learn to heal from, is the expectation that I've placed on women. The expectation that I put on them to be there always, and to let go of the resentment that built on my end, that felt as if I was supposed to do all of the work, or that felt as if I was worthless if I didn't have this much in the bank, or everything that made me valuable was based on what I gave or what I can do or the things I've done as a job or that kind of stuff, and really sink into identity, learn how to find my place in God, and to also change my view of women, to understand where some of their pain comes from, understand and accept some of where the struggle comes from, not to take those things on personally, but then also learning more of who God has called me to be and lean into that. So become more intentional about my own growth journey, be more intentional about going where God wants me to go so that when that woman comes along, eventually I'm in a healthy place to serve her, be there for her, and know that God has my back at every step of the way. So if there's anything that I would want to leave with the guys from this, from my own mistakes, is that we can find our identity truly in God. We can find our affirmation in who we're supposed to be in God, not so much from what society has told us about just having to pay the bills or just having to be there for your family. No days off, always grinding, never time for rest, never time for emotional release. None of that is sustainable. None of that is what God expects from us. He wants us to work hard and He wants us to work for Him, but He also gives us space to express what is on our heart because He wants to know it. So there's room for us to be weak before God, to show the places where we're not strong so that He can strengthen us. There's a place for us to really express to Him how we're feeling, how we want to be, where we aren't. And when we build that relationship with Him, it sets us up to be in a place where we no longer look to women as objects, or we no longer look to them as the prime praise in our journey, but we can look to them as companions. We can look to them as, people who are walking alongside us, and we can learn to serve them well. So that's one thing I definitely want to leave with the men. Zan, is there anything you want to leave with the women?
Yeah, with the ladies, I would like to leave that I understand that you're hurt. I understand that we are raised to be strong and to survive without men. And we're taught that men are not good for us. And we're taught that, you are constantly under threat from a young age. And it's hard to grow up like that. And it's hard to live, and we live in fear oftentimes. And because of that, we go through life with a burning, even if it's a low flame or a high flame in some women, a hate, a undertone of hate towards the men in our lives, and a healthy amount of distrust going into relationships with them. And I will say that I will say what my teacher used to say. She used to say that to to trust God is to forgive, and to forgive is to free your mind, and to free your mind is to release your heart, right? So if if you want to have freedom, free yourself through forgiveness. Forgive the men in your life. Forgive the things that they've done to you. Forgive them for letting you down, and accept that they are human as well, just as much as human as you, right? And that they have heavy burdens just as you. And you have to recognize that it is only through God they are able to carry those things. And your hate only cripples, because as God said that there is nothing like a scornful woman, right? So our hate and our disdain, our distrust, our resent only cripples them further, right? So definitely free yourselves, free by freeing them from your by freeing them from your resentment, you free yourself from your pain, right? So that is what I will leave with the ladies.
And that is such great wisdom. Zan, I really want to thank you for joining me on this conversation because I think this is something that our generation needs to hear. That both sides can heal to the point where, as we go into relationships, we can find harmony, we can find healthy companionship, and it's something
Mm-hmm.
that God wants for us. So that's something I'm going to pray for as we close. I'm going to pray that God would just lead all of us towards him. So Father, I thank you for everyone that is listening to this podcast. I thank you for the constitution of marriage that you made. I thank you for the bond that you've created between men and women. Even though, God, we have all gone through a lot of hardship with relationships. We've had failed relationships, we've had trauma, we've had abuse. And even though, God, I pray that you would heal every wound, every father wound, every mother wound, every situation of abuse that has happened. I pray that you would touch those deep pains wherever they may be. And I pray that forgiveness will reign in the same way that you have forgiven us. In the same way you've taught us to forgive others, I pray that if there's anyone that is holding unforgiveness, that they would release it. God, we understand how difficult it is to forgive when there has been great pain by the hands of someone that you used to love. But we have learned also that the power of forgiveness is so great that we can learn to dance again. We can learn to sing again and to walk again in your joy and in your love. So I pray that for those who have been broken by relationships, that you would heal and put the pieces back together in a way that is even more beautiful than it was before it was broken, because you can take every difficult situation and bring good. So, God, I thank you for redemption and I thank you for leading us forward in your wisdom. Teach us how to love, teach us what it means to be loved. Show us who we are and prepare us for the one that is coming. I thank you for teaching us and I give you praise for what you will do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. This was definitely one with gems. So if you know someone that has been hurt by relationships that is looking for hope again, you can share this message with them because it's really important to know that God wants us to win in this place. So, cuz as always, I love you. This is not the last time, so be prepared for the next time. You know that we always talk gems, so I'm looking forward to the next time.
I love you
Guys,
too. Thanks for having me.
always. So guys, that's the end of this episode. Stay tuned to the next episode of the link. Until then, God bless and blessings. Peace.